Hello and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day. For your free tutorial today, I want to share my Here Be Dragons design. Now, it's one of my most requested designs, but it's something that can take between 3 and 7 days to complete in the full size, like these ones. So I've miniaturized it for you, so that everybody can have their own dragon. We'll take a closer look at some examples on the board in just a second. We're going to be working with one strand of a single gauge of wire, which is 1mm or 18 gauge wire, and really any size bead that is drilled and will fit on your wire. So why don't we head down to the board and we can take a closer look at what we're going to make today. So here are just a couple of examples that I've created. I'm using raw copper round wire. I find that this design works really well in a round wire. You could, if you wanted to, give this a try in a profile wire, but I prefer it in the round. Really, the size of the wire is dependent on the drill hole of your bead. So I've got a dyed purple variscite, I've got a mixed media bead from Jessie James, and I've also got, really cool, a dragon's vein agate bead, which I think is quite appropriate. Now, all of these beads fit on a 1mm or 18 gauge wire, and that has defined what we're going to use today. So if you want to size it up, you absolutely can. What you'll find is you'll need to work slightly harder to get these lovely swooshing shapes going in a heavier gauge wire. So I'm just going to pop this variscite one up in the corner for reference. Let's just pop that up over there, and I'll put these two out of the way and then we can get cracking. So I have with me today approximately 18 inches, which is about 45 centimetres of 1mm or 18 gauge round wire, and this is raw copper. And as ever, to begin with, I'm going to grip hold of one end and just make sure that that's nice and smooth, ready to work and warm. Another thing that I'm going to do is ensure that there are no jagged edges, because the project uses pretty much all of the wire, and once that's set you may not be able to access those end sections to trim away any jagged edges. If you have a burr cup file, then by all means give that a bit of a smooth down. So we are going to be working with just the 1 gauge of wire today. You can add enhancing wire if you wish to later on, but most of these are made just with the single gauge of wire. So what we're going to do is start down at the tail, and I believe this is how dragons are born. So I'm going to grip hold of that with my bent chain nose pliers, and very close to the end, a tiny amount, I'm going to put a really sharp bend in there. So this is half the width of the dragon's tail, and I want that to be quite a sharp bend coming back on itself before I open it out slightly. I like to see, you can have a perfect triangle if you want, but I quite like to see a little bit of curvature just there. I'm going to come up again just a couple of millimetres, probably about twice the distance of our first section of wire, and bring that back down. Again, you can make this as sharp or as soft as you like it to be. If you open and close that a couple of times, you can get a better definition just on that shape, like so. So I'm going to pop underneath with my bent chain nose pliers and try to come equal and opposite to our first bend that we made. So just gripping that really firmly and bringing the wire across. Now you may hear the wire scraping on the table, for which I apologise, but it's unavoidable when you're working with a great big long strand of wire. And this is one of my most requested tutorials. And if you wish to support the tutorial, because I don't charge for these, I do have a link to buy me a coffee. There is no obligation whatsoever. I'll pop that in at the end of the tutorial. So I'm going to grip hold again, just to the right of where we initially started. I'm going to turn a very sharp bend up so that we've got that little triangle form on the very end. I'm going to give that a nice squeeze with the pliers. Any flat facing pliers for this will do, but I absolutely love my bent chain nose pliers because it allows me to get in reasonably tight places just with the tips of those pliers there. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cause the tail to swoosh around that end piece. Now if I pop those underneath and grip hold firmly, I'm just going to allow that to circle round. Now if you're not showing this to camera, you can obviously make this a little bit smoother. But what we're looking to do is to completely encircle that triangle form with the remainder of that wire. And I'm really only gripping hold just above that little triangle form. So I'm going to get that to pop all the way around. This is based on my original Celtic dragon, which was named for the Batman actor, Adam West. I created it just after we'd lost him. So the Adam West dragon I'll show you at the end of the video in a still image, and you can have a look at that as well. So I'm going to flip that over now. I'm right dominant, so you may wish to send this in the opposite direction if you prefer. It's entirely up to you. You're going to make dragons that are suitable for you. So what I want to do is to have the wire come swooshing up from that tail and curving down. So this is a long continuation of that Celtic dragon tail. And what we want to do is to make sure that that wire is beautiful and warm and fluid and smooth. So you can see that the wire is wanting to do what I'm asking it to do because I've warmed it and then put some curvature in with my thumbnail. I'm going to use my finger on the other side. If you wish to, you could use a round form such as a pencil or a dowel. You could even pop in with your bail making pliers if you want to have these exactly equal. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to trust in the wire, put some heat and warmth into it, and then grip a hold of that to bring it around. It's probably easier if I put my other set of pliers down. So as I say, you can use a form to create these sizes if you wish, but I like working with the natural fluidity of a warmed copper wire. My light has just gone out. Hold tight, we'll get that back on again. Take that slightly higher up and maybe look at tightening the hinge on that in a minute. There we go. So let's give that a bit of a firm. Once I'm happy with how those two sides of the swooshing tail look, I'm going to really get them nice and firmly set. Now, if you wish to, you could pop a block underneath each of these sections and hammer lightly just around the outside curvature here, around the outside curvature here, and all over that lower tail section. When you are hammering wire that has been crossing over, you must ensure that you don't hammer where 2 or 3 wires cross over, because you'll damage the wire and it will simply shatter on you at some point. So I'm going to grip that elongated section of tail that's coming away from underneath really close to the centre of that infinity shape, and I'm going to put an upright bend. Now I want this to be extremely firm wire, so I'm going to take that past where I want it to stand and then bring it back round, because what I want it to do is come up to the 12 o'clock position above the initial tail section. So you absolutely can hammer the wire on the dragon form at any position that you like to give it residual strength. I haven't hammered these, but what I have done is just nom-nommed with the flat facing pliers to ensure that they are quite firmly set into position. I've been wearing this one for a couple of days, and I can't find the other one, but the other one that I had on last week I've been wearing for over a week now, and there's no major dramas. If you want to size the wire up, that can only be a good thing. If you want to hammer the single sections of wire, again, that can only be a good thing. So if you have taken a moment just to hammer that section, all well and good. If not, what it does pay you to do is put that upright very firmly into position. Now I'm only squashing with the pliers just a little bit further up than my chosen bead will sit. So I'm going to use this quite random piece of chevron amethyst that I found lurking on my desk, and maybe just a couple of millimeters up from there. What you don't want to do is start munching on the wire with your pliers too far up, because we will want some more fluidity up here in just a second. But where the bead will sit, absolutely make sure that's nice and firm. If you do choose to hammer, please ensure that you don't hammer it so flat that your bead then won't fit on the wire, which is a mistake I have made in the past, and I get to make these mistakes so you don't have to. So let's scoot that bead all the way down into position. Now I made this design over and over and over until I was happy with it, that it could be achieved by people who are really quite new to wire work. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm happy with that set. The next part of the demonstration is going to be the head, because I started by making the wings and then going up to make the head of the dragon, and it was intrinsically quite weak. So what I'm doing is I'm creating quite a strong central core at this position. One thing I will say is if you do want to enhance the design with a little wire work further down, just weaving these segments together is no bad thing. I'll see if I can find an example in a minute. I've also added a little bit of weaving up at the top on this one, and it's just really encircling with a 0.4 or 26 gauge wire. I've linked one of the fins from the back of this dragon's head and his nose to the wing section, and it's just adding strength to the design. If you're going to hammer or you're going to munch with those flat facing pliers, it's not necessary, it's just something that you can absolutely add on later if you wish to. Let's get that little fella sat down neatly in the corner there. So what we do want to do is to have a small amount of distance above the bead before we turn either a right or left angle bend, dependent on which way you want your dragon to face. So I want my dragon to face to the left. So I've got here probably about 4 or 5 millimeters above that bead, and that's where we will wrap on those wings later on. So we're going to start by curving around to make the back of the head. But before we get too much further, we're going to start adding some fins on the back. Now you can have as many or as few as you want, and you can definitely call them by their proper name, which is probably not fins. So I'm going to turn a really sharp angle coming away from the back of the head like so. Pop back in with those pliers and then draw the wire back down. Now that's quite broad, so you can leave them open if you prefer. On one of my earlier dragons, those sections are really quite open. It's quite dramatic. You can also then weave into that if you prefer. But for today's mini dragon tutorial, we're going to squish that up like the racetrack hairpin that we should be familiar with by now, and I'm going to set that in position by giving that a quick squish with the pliers. Now for the next section, I'm just going to very, very gently grip that section we've just created and continue along the way, popping the pliers back in and creating a second one at a slightly different angle. So the distance between the two little protrusions from the back of the dragon's head is very small, but it's larger at the end than it is at the section which attaches to the head. So if I bring this back down and in, we're just going to have 3 protrusions on the back of this dragon's head, again squeezing carefully and gently. The wire will want to have one section fall underneath rather than stay side by side, so you just need to take small movements rather than trying to get it all done in one go. So I'm going to just open that out slightly and add the third and final protrusion. On most of my dragons I've been putting 4, but I don't want to repeat the same element of the tutorial over and over. So bringing that last section back around, what we're going to do is give that a squish and then bend the wire again so that it continues along on its way. Give that a bit of a squeeze like so. Make sure that you're happy with those. You could add a little more curvature at the back if you wanted to, ensuring that your neck section stays nice and upright. So for the head, I've gone for almost a seahorse inspired design shape. So I'm going to grip very, very firmly, about the same distance along as I have put gaps between those protrusions, and then draw very sharply down, which would be the brow bone. Pop the pliers in again, back out towards the nose. And then what we're going to do is make quite a short nose, draw that wire all the way back around and underneath to create a chin feature, before bringing that out a little bit. If you imagine a horse's head or a seahorse's head, that's the kind of shape that we're going for. If you're getting a little bit tight in there, you can just open that up slightly. You can bring that back in later. So we're going to now put a cheekbone before coming back down to meet the neck of the design like so. So if I give that a bit of a squeeze, you should see that start coming together. You can obviously make that exactly how you desire. I'm just giving you some inspiration and some hints that I found out along the way of making dozens of these little chaps. Unfortunately, some of them did end up in the bin marked experience, but I do have several of them now available. So I'm just going to make sure that those wires sit very, very close together. If you wish to, you can add some weaving in later on to bring those two sections together. What I'm going to do is to draw the line of wire back down now so that it's parallel to the neck that comes out of the bead. Now this is one of the trickier parts of the design. It's not difficult, it is just tricky, especially if you are newer to wire work. So I'm going to pop the pliers underneath to begin with and draw the wire very, very sharply across the neck of the design. Now I've got a lot of wire still to work with, so I'm just going to warm that wire and just bring it round a little bit, so it's going to hopefully ping fewer things off the desk. So you can see we've created our head shape. You could have 4 protrusions, you could have multiple, you could have open, you could have really long protrusions. Your dragon, your design. So what I'm going to do is grip those 2 wires that are at the top of the neck very, very tightly. The wire that's passed across the top and streams away, we're just going to wrap once around that neck section. This is quite important to get nice and tight, and the reason I'm holding with the pliers is because if you don't, what can happen is this wire will end up travelling around and you lose the shape of the head that you've just made. So I'm going to give that a bit of a squish and a tighten and make sure I'm happy with both of those sections. You can see we've still got a little bit of space above our central body bead. That's important because it allows us to attach the wings either side. What we're looking for here is to have an element of neatness. You could cover it up later with coils if you wanted to, like I did on this one because I slightly mashed it, but that's not to worry. You can always add a coil if you need to. Let's pop that down back in the corner. Hopefully that's still in view. So what we're going to do now is start working on the right wing. And you can see that the wire has become a little bit tense, and that's because we just turned it around that core that comes out of the bead, and the tension from that travels a little way along the wire. So you just need to add a little bit more warmth, and then you will be able to get that nice fluid smoothness again. So what we're going to do is to create a little arc coming up, and I've been choosing to create my wings in an almost bat-like formation. If you are a bat expert, please don't talk to me about how wrong I am. It is an inspiration only. I am not a bat expert. So what I'm going to do is grip hold of the elongated section of wire and push out now to the right hand side again, and have that dramatically reaching up to create the first of our 2 wings. So I'm going to pop those pliers in again and draw that back towards the body of the design, like so. And then it's just a case of doing some swooshes. So you can see already that we're getting quite short on wire, which is why I use 18 inches as a minimum, and it's really tricky when you are gauging how much wire you need to use. If you start to run out, what I would say is we can add wings separately, and a couple of my dragons did have that happen. We're going to have enough wire with this one, but don't panic. If you think that your dragon is looking quite large, it's possible that that's what you'll need to do. So what I'm going to do is make some little arcs or little rainbows just coming down, and you can have 2 little sections, 3 little sections, 7 little sections. It's entirely up to you. What I'm going to do is just have a single section up at the end there, and then push that back towards the body, like so. So this is going to be quite a simple dragon. What you can do is put another little arc in, bring it down to a point exactly the same as the first, and then continue to the core. So this one has got 1 arc, 2 arcs, and a 3rd arc. This one that we're working on right now has just got the 2. Some of them have got even more. Let's pop that back out of the way. The technique is basically the same. We're just pushing shapes and then bringing sharp points down. So what I'm going to do is grip very, very firmly on the wing that we've created so far. And what I want to do is not to take up too much space on the central core. So if I flip that over the top side, what I might do actually is just grip above. We're on the wing section, but I'm gripping above that central core. I'm going to put a sharp bend down and around. And what I need to do is feed the end of the wire through that first wing. So you can see that that's going up and inside. And this is why continuously making sure that your wire is nice and smooth is a smart idea. So I've brought the tail of the wire inside that wing section. I'm going to grip very, very firmly and draw that over the central body. Now what can happen here is that things get a little bit tight or a little bit messy. What I want to do is have this section of wire that's continuing make the lower side of the wing, upper as we're looking at it, lower of the body. So what I need to do is just pinch that very, very gently together, being cautious of my bead always, and get that to sit down against the other wire. What can happen with this design is that you'll end up with one wing on one side which is 4 wires apart, and on the other it's no wires apart, and it can look a little bit unequal. So we're going to try and make a little bit of space there just so that we get a little bit more equality. Now this honestly is a by eye situation for me. If you wanted to measure these dimensions or draw them out first and then trace them, you absolutely can. There are always options for making things 100% accurate. I'm going to go a little bit by eye. So there we have that. I'm going to give that a smooth and a swoosh, trying to replicate approximately where the bend occurs on the first side. Push that wire like so, and I'm going to try and recreate a similar kind of pinch on that, so I might take it slightly further than I need and then draw it back out. I tend not to use tools to create these swooshes or arcs or little rainbow shapes, but you absolutely can if you want to use a ring mandrel. Just make sure that you're warming your wire before you bring those tools in. So if I flip that up the other way, it might be slightly easier for my eye to judge where we need to go next. So I might just draw that slightly further out to the side, pliers underneath, and again you can measure if you want to. I'm going to go by eye. Most of my dragons have got one wing slightly larger than the other, but then hey, I've got one leg longer than the other, and that's life. Maybe dragons don't mind. So what we need to do now is bring that back along to try and replicate that first side. There's very gentle curvature in here at the top, imagining that that's approximately the same kind of space before bringing the wire back down in the last arc back towards the body. So if you can get the wire to sit above the other wing, all well and good, because it means that they will be slightly more symmetrical. If you can't, just bang it in the middle, and you can add a curl if it bothers you. I'm going to pop it over the top of the right hand wing. Just want to make sure that my shapes and forms and sizes are acceptable before I move on to the next one. That's definitely a little bit larger, so I'm just going to undo that step and draw it further down. You get maybe one chance to fix that if it's not quite right for you. And then what we're going to do is put that curvature back in, draw the wire over the surface of the design, have another look. Kind of straighten that out a bit more if you want to. The idea is practice with your cheap wire before you get onto your expensive wire. So I'm now going to pinch very firmly over the whole design and push this wire around the back. If you feel that you need help with that, lay your pliers on the tail of wire that's coming over the surface, line it up with where you think you'll need that first bend to occur, push the wire to get a sharp bend initially, and then what should happen is that will line up as you bring the tail around, and you should lose less of the wing by being drawn around that core, which is something that happens a lot in wire work. So what I'm going to do now is pinch this wing on the left hand side very firmly as I bring the elongated tail over the right hand side. What I found as I went through the process of making the dragons is adding a little bit of strength to the neck was really handy. So as we have a tail of wire available, I'm just going to wrap it around that neck section. Now you can make this super neat if you want to. I'm just going to go for a couple of coils, a couple of circuits around the neck section, tidy that up ever so slightly, give that a bit of a squish and a squeeze, and then what we're going to do is grab hold of those round nose pliers and we're going to create a coil. Now I already trimmed the end, so there's no need to double check that. I checked both of them were nice and smooth and flat. So I'm going to start turning that coil slowly. I've got the start of a coil there before squishing that super firmly flat and drawing the coil down towards the body of the dragon. Now I'm coiling in an opposite orientation to where it's about 90 degrees out from where I want it to sit, but it's much easier for me to make this coil happen neatly if I'm not struggling with the dragon at the same time. Can you imagine having your own little dragon to hang out with? It would be super cool. I love dragons and I've been collecting them since I was a small child. Not actual dragons, you understand, that wouldn't be ethical. So what I'm going to do now is take that coil I've just created. I'm going to make sure that that is firmly set before I push it down over the centre of those wings. And if there's any mistakes that you've made or your wings aren't perfectly symmetrical, that will help offset the balance. So I'm going to pop a couple of dragons in. so that you can see the variances that occur. Of course, the ones that have chains on have all just decided to have a party and hang out together. So the chains are all linked, which is, you know, it's just part of making jewellery, isn't it? So enjoy. Let's get that one brought in to show you next. So this is the one with the dragon's vein agate. I really like this one. I think he was about the second or third one that I made, and you can see those coils that we were just talking about here. I also had an extra tail of wire from the end after I'd done those coils around the neck, so I made a little bit of a coolie hat for the body of the dragon, which obviously is something that you can add if you wish to. You don't have to. And then we've got this fancy little fella here, which I'm just going to drop in at the bottom. So you can use whatever bead is going to fit on your wire, which will work securely for you. So we have here, according to the internet, whom I asked the other day, the collective noun for dragons is a thunder, which I think is really kind of cool. So we've just made this little chap together, and all I'm doing is adding lengths of chain with little jump rings. They can be long chain to be worn on the body. It can be contrasting chain. It doesn't really matter, however you want to achieve that. And you can see that you can play around with the arcs on these dragons. So these are quite deep. This one is quite shallow. You could add more. You could have fewer. Absolutely. So it's only taken me about 5 years to bring this to you since I made my first couple of dragons. But I hope that you've enjoyed the Here Be Dragons tutorial with me today. Do hook up with me on Facebook and show me what you make, and if you're enjoying the project, do let me know. Don't forget, a like and a subscription does help the channel, and also if you do wish to make a contribution towards the upkeep of the channel, buying the wire and the gemstones and the such, then I do now have just recently badgered in getting a buy me a coffee function, which I'll put a link to down in the description. Have the most beautiful day, stay dragony, and I'll see you very soon. I'm Gem Hawks. Bye for now.